prone to hyperbole tonight, I'm going to go ahead and go there too. Slavery was declared slavery was legal. There were Supreme Courts that maintained inequalities, Supreme Courts that maintained separate but equal, Supreme Courts that maintained immigration quotas, Supreme Courts that have maintained a lot of things that were not constitutional, and there are senators in every case that have had the opportunity to make the changes if they had the courage to do so. A lot of the decisions that Supreme Courts have made have later been found to be unconstitutional, only by later groups. So we have the opportunity today to make changes. We have the opportunity to have the courage to make changes today, because this is about disenfranchisement. And yes, it is about impeachment, but as much as the laws that are on the books tend to obscure what the point is, the big picture is that this is about justice. And a lot of times I think we get lost in all of the authority that people have and a lot of the badges that we place on people who are supposed to be upholding justice, because that's really what the bottom line is, and that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to uphold justice. And where there is injustice, we have this opportunity tonight to change that.
Thank you. Travis, and then Daniel, and then Pooja.
I'll be somewhat brief. I'm just going to address several points. The first one, regarding the impeachment in general, Max Morley's comment about 1802 or the state you gave. The SGA Supreme Court was actually impeached in 2002, but not removed here as a result of election rules and violations. I believe there was another person impeached in AVP in 2003, but also not removed as well. So this sort of stuff has come here before, whether it's about that issue or not. The second thing is, I have a question is, well, okay, when it comes to the statement, we're talking about the word any in it. I mean, I want to look at it like this. The Supreme Court shall hear any cases pertaining to election rules, etc. Or you could word it, any case about election rules shall be heard by the Supreme Court. It's just rearranging the words, I mean, in the sentence. So, I mean, to delineate between the word any, I mean, that's why it specifically states that in there. And while we're talking about the intent, yes, the real truth is that we actually asked the people that wrote the Constitution, not just people interpreting it, but people who actually wrote it, what does this mean? People who were justices. And we have the formal statement that we've read in here twice now to the Senate. And lastly is simply this. The reason why we're here tonight is simply that we want to take action for the point over there. We will try and fix the Constitution in the future. But, you know, the way the court is operating right now, they might as well say, well, there will be elections, there will be a top four, there will be a Senate, and we'll fill in the blanks as we see fit. And that's really what we're here tonight for.
Thank you. My phone's dying, if you guys wanted to know. Travis, thank you for your point. Daniel Cameron, it's now your turn.
I guess I just want to respond to that. Regardless of if the words were intended to mean a certain thing, when you write them in a certain way, they mean that. You can't, if I was to say, I ran to the store, and then in that same sentence I could change it to say, store ran, or something about the store, the store ran to me, basically. So I could change a sentence to mean anything I would want it to mean. So I think that we have to look, so if we're looking at the construction of the Constitution, the document that we have before us, that document says, you know, in such a way that they can hear any. If I was to say, buy any shoe that you'd like to buy, I mean, I buy all the shoes, I buy any shoe, 1, 2, 3, any of the shoes. The other thing, back to Linda's point, which is a good point, I think that we're very aware that civil rights at some point was frowned upon in our country, and that women's suffrage and things like that were frowned upon. But in all those instances you named, none of those courts were impeached. None of those courts were impeached because of the stances they took, because just as some people have been saying tonight, the way our system is set up, whether it's the SGA Constitution or the United States government, and that Constitution, it's set up in such a way that we trust the decisions of the Supreme Court. So hindsight is always 20/20. We can always say, well, we should have done something differently. And maybe, I think people have mentioned, maybe the best way to look at this is look at maybe structurally changing the Constitution that you have. But don't fault the people that use that Constitution in a way that they were given the authority to use. That's all.
Thank you. Daniel, that was your second. Pooja, it's your turn back there. I make a motion to vote on this, or is that not? Can we do that? You can call, there's not a motion on.
Move the previous question is what you're looking
Okay.
for.
Well, because I feel like it's 9:30 on this, and we have heard, I feel like I've heard both sides. I think I have heard both sides. And I have my own opinions too, but I think it's time that we can vote on this. If you guys don't think, if you think we need to talk more, that's fine, but I make a motion to vote on the impeachment process.
Move the previous question.
So, she's moving to the previous question, which is the impeachment process as a whole.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Once we vote to, if we vote to impeach, is there anything beyond this? Because I know impeachment.
Well, I'll look this up today. According my reading of the Constitution, which technically in my standpoint, as Senate Speaker and as a part of the legislative body, it's not my interpretation anyway, but the way I read it is that all the wording is for justice. There are no justices. And so we would have to go through the process of impeaching each person, unless the motion's made to do a blanket statement and impeach them all, which my personal opinion is not, that we should not do that. However, if we move forward, Dean Martis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the reading of the Constitution, which I would encourage all of you who have opinions about this to be based in the Constitution, because that's what we're talking about. So, my reading of the Constitution is that the next step will be impeachment, voting on impeachment per person. And then after that, we would move to, in a later meeting, removal of office. Is that correct? From what
Would there
I'm
be another
hearing?
hearing?
Point of parliamentary inquiry. We have someone who wrote part of the Constitution here. He could probably clarify it for us, since he's saying, okay, saying no, no, no.
However, he is not a part of this group right now. Therefore, it's not his, I don't mean to be rude to you, but it's not, this is not his SGA. And his jurisdiction is now given to them as the judicial branch of our Student Government Association.
But you as speaker could recognize him.
I can recognize him to
Yes.
speak though, yes.
That's what I
if we
was
get to
saying,
that.
yes.
Yes.
And that's, I mean, I was addressing my parliamentary inquiry to you for him. But
Yes.
I was
Yes.
wondering if you would recognize him to say, because he's shouting no, no, no from behind.
Dean Martis has something to say, and then we'll bump there. Dean Martis, go ahead.
I think is coming off of what you're saying, what would be next? You have to have a court. I mean, SGA is governed by its constitution, so you have to have a court in order to be able to have elections, because they are deemed the impartial body to run the elections, because the Senate and the executive don't have to be impartial. So, I mean, part of this is to, I mean, I know there's a resolution on the floor. So the next step, however you, if Megan thinks it's appropriate to do it individually, but you have to have a court to have an election. So I mean, because there's a next step there. So that, I mean, that piece would have to be rectified. And some of what I've heard people say is being able to have the election. Well, you have to have a court to have an election.
Because technically, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we move on to the next document, as we still have 4, if we move to that and we pass the resolution about enfranchisement again, we have to have somewhere to send that. And we don't have a court if they get impeached and removed tonight. We don't have that. So that's something else to keep. Paul?
I've got that addressed in another letter.
Okay.
So we'll deal with that later.
We'll deal with that later. Keep in mind, we're on 1 of 3. Paul, you can,
I was asking.
Point of order.
Advice.
go ahead.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
We have a motion to move to the, thank you.
But I have probably.
And we're in discussion on moving to that.
That does not have a discussion.
That does not have discussion.
Right.
Is the motion,
Moved.
Jerome, help me here. We have been moved,
The motion has been
the
made.
motion has been made. I use incorrect language, I'm sorry.
I
The
second the
motion has been made and seconded to move to the question, which is voting upon the impeachment process, if we're gonna move to the impeachment process. Are we all together? Yes. Okay, just so I'm correct, is this one 50% and then the actual impeachment is 2/3?
Under parliamentary inquiry, he's shouting that.
Is that what you're,
Well, yeah, if you let me clarify, I have no position on impeachment at all. I don't at all. I just want to clarify one thing. You actually have 2 things going on right now. When he sent the letter, he initiated removal proceedings under constitutional subdivision 665, which only requires one single 2/3 public vote. Then you came in here and made a motion to impeach. You actually have both proceedings. What you might want to do is just go ahead and move to the 2/3 removal vote, get it over and done with, and then just postpone indefinitely the impeachment. Because you're actually trying to remove them under two separate processes.
Okay.
So you can just go straight to a 2/3 removal vote because he already sent a letter to the floor